What a crazy day we're having here at Pigskin Pointer Central. What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan Phillip Lam, and welcome to Pigskin Pointers. We are your source for fantasy news and knowledge on twitch.tv as well as youtube.com. Today we've got an action-packed show for you. Hopefully you can hear us properly. We've had a little bit of an issue as far as microphones are concerned, but not to worry. I think we have everything squared away. Today we're taking a look at the AFC East. Now, the AFC East arms race, it was a real thing. The Patriots, they're fresh off of a Super Bowl victory. Everyone else in the division decided to upgrade, whether it be through free agency or the draft. And now, the Patriots have to face off against Deflategate. It's going to be interesting to see just how well the Patriots are going to be able to do without their star quarterback, Tom Brady, in the first few games of the season. Now, later this week, we're going to have a good idea of whether or not it's going to be 4 games or less for Tom Brady sitting out the beginning of the season. But regardless, there are storylines abound, and today we're going to take a look at all of them as we go around the division. But first, why don't we give a little shout out to our sponsor? Our sponsor this week is Echo Nebraska. You can check them out at echonebraska.com. Their new album, Send the Ships, is out right now. You can check them out on iTunes, Bandcamp, and Spotify. Their new single, Hey Allison, is on YouTube right now, and it's fantastic. If you get a chance, do watch that video. Now, big, huge, whopping shout out to Jamfer, who's in the chat right now. Jamfer, thank you so much for all your help today. You've really helped us figure out a lot of the microphone issues that we're having earlier today. And without you, we'd probably be looking at a mute show, which I don't know how interesting that would be. It might be interesting. I don't know. Anyhow, I'm going to take a little sip of water, and we're going to continue on looking at the AFC East. Now, what we typically do with this show is that we'll take a look at the division winner, and then we'll go down the line down to the division loser, if you will. And so, of course, when it comes to the AFC East, everything runs through the Patriots. Now, the New England Patriots are facing Deflategate. Right now, pretty soon we're going to find out whether or not Tom Brady is going to have a reduced sentence as far as his suspension is concerned. And he's going to be meeting with the commissioner, Roger Goodell, to figure out whether or not that's the case. So, even without Brady, the Patriots have plenty fantasy relevancy as far as the league is concerned. There are plenty of great players that can be had on New England. But really, where do you go? It's difficult. Week to week, when it comes to Belichick likes to not necessarily ride the hot hand like some coaches do. In fact, he'll have one player heat up and do crazy, go off. How many times have you seen it where you'd have a Julian Edelman or a Stephen Ridley back when he was with the Patriots just go off? Just have a crazy fantasy day. And then what does Belichick do the next day? Let's make it a James Gray kind of day. Let's look over to LeGarrette Blount. Belichick doesn't care. Doesn't care about who's producing today. He cares about what's going to happen right now against whichever team he's facing. That's one of the brilliant things about this team, and that's part of the reason why they've been able to be so dominant in the AFC over the past, decade or so. Now, because of that, it is going to be difficult to draft Patriots players. But when you're looking at the schedule, which we will be in a moment, they are going to be super fantasy relevant in the playoffs. And one player that you can always depend on, as long as he's healthy, that is Rob Gronkowski. Now, Rob Gronkowski is going to be a number 1 tight end this year, and it's not even close. He's going to be the number 1 tight end off the board easily. He's a matchup nightmare that not many people are able to challenge, if anyone at all. And even without Brady, he's going to be the first passing option for any quarterback. Imagine you are a Jimmy Garoppolo and you're not necessarily scared, but you're debuting in the NFL in a real game, in a game that really means something. It's your first game. And you look out, the defensive line wants to tear your head off. Your offensive line is pretty average, but has some holes. Who do you think he's going to be throwing to? There's no question about that. Your number one option is Rob Gronkowski. Now, one of the detractors of drafting Rob Gronkowski is he is going to be going in the first round. So that's going to really affect the way that you draft the rest of your team. Is your team going to suffer depth-wise if you draft Rob Gronkowski? There is question to be had there. There is a legitimate question to be had there. You got to ask yourself, what is going to make the most sense for my team? Is Rob Gronkowski going to be so much an advantage at that tight end position that it's okay if you kind of punt on all the other positions? That's a question you're going to have to answer yourself. And if you go with Gronkowski first overall, you better have a really good plan this year. Now, why don't we take a look at the Patriots schedule? The first 4 games could be anything from competitive contests to complete disasters. Jags in Week 3 seems like the only game that could be a boon to what could be a Jimmy Garoppolo-led squad. Either way, Brady taking on the Colts in Week 5 should give them ample motivation to get back into the AFC East race, grab whoever the Pats running back is for the Colts game and hit on him hard. A couple of division clashes and a couple of lower-end NFC East opponents have the potential for points on the board for Pats players. Whenever the Broncos and Patriots get together, they seem to be great fantasy games, so don't hesitate to play any Pats. You gotta like Gronk and Edelman when they get the Eagles at this point, so keep that in the back of your mind for Week 13. A couple of favorable matchups against the Titans and the Texans could have you sitting pretty in your fantasy playoffs. And speaking of the fantasy playoffs, one of the things that you might want to consider is drafting Tom Brady. Now, Tom Brady is going to be suspended for the first 4 games, and all you have to do is pick up a streaming quarterback for those first 4 games. There are plenty of streaming quarterbacks to be had. In fact, one crazy thought might be to go ahead and draft Sam Bradford or possibly a Derek Carr, someone that is not necessarily going to be drafted as a number 1 quarterback going forward. Draft a good backup, and then get Tom Brady. Tom Brady can be had in the later rounds, probably around round 7 or round 8. And he's well worth a pickup, especially if you're looking forward to your fantasy playoffs. Now, why don't we take a look at the Buffalo Bills? Now, the Buffalo Bills, they have a really exciting defense as it is. And now they're adding Rex Ryan, a very defensive-minded coach, as their new head coach. So there's lots to be excited about the Bills, right? Luckily, we have not had any playoff proclamations yet from Rex Ryan, and I think the major reason why is that their quarterbacks have looked god-awful in the OTAs as well as minicamps. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, it's just OTAs. It's just minicamps. Their 3 quarterbacks have looked god-awful throughout this whole process. EJ Manuel, you can't depend on him whatsoever. Matt Castle has been a dumpster fire. You thought he would be a lot better than he has been. It gives Bills Nation a lot to worry about. And they're not only faced with that, they're facing off against the fact that they have an offensive line that was graded out as the second to last offensive line in all of the NFL last year per Pro Football Focus. Now, I don't know how much stock you take in Pro Football Focus, but that offensive line is visibly poor. So that's going to really affect things. If you have a crappy offensive line and you don't have a quarterback who can actually play, what are you going to do? Well, they've got Percy Harvin, you say. They've got Sammy Watkins. They can get open for days. Guess what? You still have that issue of not having a good quarterback. And to top that all off, you have a crappy offensive line. What are you going to do? Well, hopefully the star players will make a difference. And one of those star players could quite possibly be LeSean McCoy. Now, LeSean McCoy has had over 300 touches in the last 2 seasons. And that's something that should not be overlooked. He is definitely one of the best running backs in the league. Is he going to be able to get beyond the fact that the offensive line is so bad? I don't know. I'm not sure. Who knows? But if anyone has the skill set to succeed despite the pieces around him, it is definitely LeSean. Now, let's not forget that he is only one season removed from leading the entire league in rushing. He can be had in the first round, but you are going to have to ask yourself the question, how secure do I feel with LeSean? If you're getting him in the first round, more than likely you're going to be at the back end of that first round. And he doesn't seem all that bad in that particular spot. But there is some worry as far as what's going on with that team. Luckily, the schedule doesn't seem to be too bad at the beginning of the season, and there are some options. So even with poor offensive line play, there is a chance that Shady might. Let's put an asterisk beside moderate. The Bills will need competent QB play for any of their upgrades to make a difference. Starting off against AFC powerhouses in the Colts and the Pats, starting LeSean McCoy against these two teams that have struggled against the run is a no-doubter. 4 of the first 6 matchups will prove to be running back friendly if my projections hold up. October 25th is an interesting game in that the Jaguars are hosting in London. The Brits have developed a fandom for both the Dolphins and the Jaguars, but the travel won't affect the outcome of this game. Start all your Bills. After the bye, there will be 3 consecutive interdivisional matchups, which will more than likely decide whether or not the Bills will be playing meaningful football come January. After facing some defensive powerhouses in Kansas City and Houston, the Bills will face the remainder of the NFC East, which could prove to be cake against typically defensively weak teams. Either way, you have to love facing off against Washington in your fantasy semifinals. Yep, you're going to have some really good setups there, and so there is good options for LeSean McCoy. He's not the worst option out there for sure, but there are some more intriguing options as far as your first running backs are concerned. So do keep that in mind. Do keep in mind the warts, because that is something that, you're going to have to cover over. There will be games where that offensive line is just going to sit down right on Shady. They're big men. Even Shady can't dodge all of them. Just keep that in mind when you're picking your first running back. He's still not a bad option, but there might be some better ones depending on where you're picking. Anyways, let's take a look at the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins made a splash in free agency by signing Ndamukong Suh to quarterback money. And speaking of quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill. Now, he has progressively made progress. You see what I did there? I used the same word twice. Progressively, he's made progress over the course of his career, and he's translated that into one of those enormous quarterback contracts. Now, here's the question. Will they be able to get to that next level? They've gone 8-8 in the past 2 seasons. Joe Philbin, the coach, he is on the hot seat for sure. Do they have the pieces in place to take the Dolphins to the next level? That's a good question to be had. There's plenty of fantasy relevant players in Miami. For instance, you can get Lamar Miller in the 2nd round. Now, he is their running back for now. He was actually much more impressive than the Dolphins were expecting him to be last year. And he's certainly a good option to have. But if I was going to be picking up Lamar Miller, I don't think I could trust him as my running back one. I would want to have someone who's a little bit more talented at that position, a little bit more guaranteed to get his yards than Lamar Miller. If only for not the fact that Lamar Miller is not necessarily devoid of talent. He is rather talented. The issue is, how much trust is that coaching staff going to place in him? That's a good question. If you look down the lineup, you've got Devontae Parker. Now, Devontae Parker, the first rounder out of Louisville, he can be had in later rounds. But is he going to be relevant? That's a good question. Think about this. When you look at the last season, we had so many rookie wide receivers go out and play lights out, play amazingly. Is that repeatable? Is that just a single season aberration? Or is this the new way of the NFL, where you can plug in rookie wide receivers into any slot and suddenly they can do magic? It's going to be interesting to see what they are going to be able to do with Devontae Parker. If he stumbles, luckily they do have a safety measure that might not be too safe. We're talking about Jordan Cameron. Now, Jordan Cameron, he can be had around the 7th round, and I think that that's pretty good value. I know that there is some worry as far as his concussion history is concerned, but I think he's an upgrade to Charles Clay. He's more athletic. He has a better frame, and he's proven that he can do lots with crappy quarterbacks. Yes, the Browns quarterbacks in the past couple of seasons have not been that good. And he's done it. Now, the question is whether or not he can stay healthy. Well, that's the gamble you're going to have to take. If you don't manage to get one of the 2 top-tier tight ends, Jordan Cameron is a good option to be had. And speaking of good options, around the same area, you can actually get a really decent wide receiver that is going to be playing for Miami next year, and that guy is Jarvis Landry. Now, Jarvis Landry, he figures to be the main wide receiver in Bill Lazor's offense. He had a really decent rookie campaign, and he's looking to improve on that. Now, you can't question the targets. He had an insane amount of targets. He had an insane amount of receptions. Of course, the yards per catch, not all that good. But he looks to be improving. He has other weapons around him, which will definitely take the attention away from him a little bit. Those touchdowns, they're going to improve. And for a guy that you can have in the 6th round, I don't think you can go wrong with that. Now let's take a look at Miami's schedule, and you'll see that there are some options that are good for Jarvis Landry. The Dolphins could easily go 5-6 to start the season, and they might need to as their schedule gets a lot more difficult later on. Washington and the Jags look good right now, and you have to like them hosting Buffalo. By week 4, we will know just how legit the Jets' D will be, and that will go a long way to determining the viability of your Dolphins players. After the bye, they have the Titans and the Texans, which will have you blessing the name Jarvis Landry. After a couple of less viable AFC East matchups, the Dolphins get 3 of 4 games against the NFC East. This could prove to be pure fantasy gold, including a juicy Week 14 matchup against the Giants. Moving right along, we have the New York Jets. Now, the Meadowlands has 2 NFL teams, and the Jets are looking to finally prove that they are worth watching? I guess. Actually, when my wife and I went and saw them in the Meadowlands play against the Saints, they actually won that game. That was a couple seasons ago. And that was the first season that we saw Geno Smith come out and do his thing. And that particular game, it was really exciting. They had Nick Folk, who they still have as their kicker. Won me a ton of fantasy points that week. I won on Nick Folk's leg alone. And they sport then what they sport now, which is an exciting defense. And they also have a new coaching regime. So there's a lot of people who are excited over what's going to be happening as far as this team is concerned. Now, fantasy-wise, it's going to be difficult to draft pretty much anyone. They have an average offensive line. And they have some decent running backs. So they have really decent running back depth. But who is going to be their running back? Is it going to be Chris Ivory? Is it going to be Zach Stacy? Is it going to be Darrell Richardson? Is it going to be some other spare part that they managed to get from the Rams? How about Stephen Ridley? Now, when Stephen Ridley wasn't busy fumbling the ball every other snap, he actually looked like a decent fantasy option. Are they even going to play him? It's amazing just how deep that backfield is, but who's going to end up being the number one running back? More than likely, they're going to start out with Chris Ivory, but it really could be any one of them because all those running backs are average to above average tier, pretty much in the same sort of wheelhouse. So don't be surprised if you see one or the other. If Stephen Ridley can get over that leg injury and stop dropping the ball, if he recovers from the leg injury and fumbleitis, well, there's a good chance you might see him as their starting running back. Now, in order to take some of the pressure off of that running back core and the fact that they don't have a QB, let's hold on a second. Who are they going to go with for QB? Are they going to go with Geno Smith, who last year he managed to end the season off rather well, but was poorly inconsistent? Are they going to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who himself is coming off of an injury and hasn't necessarily been the best in the league? It's hard to say. Sort of like the Buffalo Bills, this offense begins and ends with the quarterback play. Now, it's fantastic that they managed to get Brandon Marshall in, who's a legitimate number one receiver. But if I'm going to draft anyone on this Jets team, it's probably going to be Eric Decker. Now, it's his second season with the New York Jets, so we're hoping that this second season will help develop some consistency with his play. You take a look at his stats, not exactly burning down the house. But with that legit number one in play in Brandon Marshall, who's coming over from the Chicago Bears, he will take a lot of attention away from Eric Decker, which means that Decker can be had in the later rounds pretty much at the right price. Now, granted, what his floor is probably around what he played last year. I think that when you take a look at his play last year, that's his floor. That's his floor. He's a wide receiver 3 with that sort of floor, but he has wide receiver 2 potential. So if you're looking at drafting depth in the wide receiver position, you can't go wrong with Eric Decker. Unless, of course, you draft him high, because then that's foolish. Don't draft him high. He can be had in around the 9th round and later, and that's an easy pick. If you were looking to round out your wide receiving core, you can probably get 3 wide receivers better than him and get Eric Decker in like the 10th or 11th. He's going to be one of those players that most casual coaches, casual fantasy owners, they'll forget him. Don't you forget him. He's going to be a great addition to your squad, and he has a great upside, so why not? So long as he doesn't get injured. And the quarterbacks play better. And Brandon Marshall plays well. Yeah, there's a lot of ifs there. But trust me. Later rounds, I'm sitting on your bench. He definitely has wide receiver 2 upside. So pick him. Right away, there are a couple games that may make the Jets seem like a mirage by the end of the season. The Browns could make Eric Decker look good as he draws Justin Gilbert. Next up, you have the Colts on Monday night, which may make whichever running back the Jets end up going with look awesome. Regardless, you will be hitting on the Jets D hard over these first 4 games before the bye, and beyond as they also take on Washington, Oakland, and Jacksonville in 3 of their next 4 games after the bye. If the Jets can get even average quarterback play, the DST and running backs will be viable all season. So, there you have it, folks. Pick up the New York Jets D. Crazy schedule, right? That's just totally nutty. Let's take another look at our sponsor. Now, our sponsor this week is Echo Nebraska. You can check them out at echonebraska.com. Get their new album. It's called Send the Ships. It's out now. It's on iTunes, Bandcamp, and Spotify. They're fantastic. Check out YouTube. Their video for Hey Allison is phenomenal. It's fun. It's lighthearted. It's the type of music that you listen to when your fantasy football show that's streaming live on Twitch is dying. It's burning in a dumpster. If it wasn't for the help of Jamfer, the backseat producer, I don't know where we would be. But anyways, echonebraska.com. Check that out. And that is the show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us on YouTube, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to reply to anything. And also, we'll address it live on the show. Next week, we're actually looking at this Saturday at 2 p.m. We're going to be doing a fun little show. It's going to be the Seth and Ryan show. We're taking a look at tight ends, DSTs, and kickers. Just the top 5, so no big deal. Go ahead and check that out at 2 p.m. For producer Jenny, backseat producer Jamfer, I'm Ryan Phillip Lam, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Interested in more Pigskin pointers? Check out the Seth and Ryan show Saturdays at 2 p.m. or click on the link to check out one of our previous episodes. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for your time.